A widowed Apache took in a bleeding woman next morning. 50 warriors arrived at his door, a lonely cabin in the mountains. A man haunted by loss, and a stranger, half dead, collapsing into his arms. He chooses mercy, stitching her wounds. Beneath the flicker of lamplight, but at sunrise the sound of hooves shakes the earth. 50 armed warriors surround his home, demanding answers. The woman whispers a secret: she wasn't attacked by Apaches at all, but by white raiders, dressed to look like them. A map sewn into her dress hints at a plan to steal water from both settlers and tribes. The man must choose: protect her and risk being branded a traitor, or hand her over and lose the one chance to expose the truth. As fire spreads, guns are drawn, and loyalties are tested. One question burns brighter than all the rest. Will mercy spark peace, or ignite a war that swallows them all? Your reactions reaffirm something simple yet powerful, that stories still shape us, even in silence. If you believe in the soft endurance of love, truth, and doing what's right, then you're exactly why these stories exist. The wind howled through the mountain pines, rattling the wooden shutters of Tahu's lonely cabin. Inside, the Apache widower sat in the amber glow of a coal oil lamp, his weathered hands working steadily at mending a broken bridle. The leather was old, but good, much like himself, he reckoned. The quiet of his evening ritual wrapped around him like a familiar blanket. The sudden pounding at his door made him start, the leather slipping from his fingers. No one came to his door after sunset, not ever. The settlers feared and avoided him, and his own people rarely ventured this far from their lands. Another desperate knock echoed through the cabin. Tahu rose slowly, his hand moving to the knife at his belt. The floorboards creaked beneath his moccasins as he crossed to the door. When he pulled it open, the bitter wind rushed in, carrying with it the crumpled form of a white woman. She fell forward, and he caught her before she hit the ground. Her skin was cold as creek water, her fine dress soaked with blood. In the lamplight, he could see she was young, maybe 20 summers, with hair the color of sun-bleached wheat. A bullet wound marked her side, still seeping red into the fabric of her dress. "Please," she whispered, her eyes glazed with pain. "They're coming, ... Then she went limp in his arms. Tahu stood for a moment, looking out into the darkness. Nothing moved except the swaying trees and wind-driven snow. Whatever danger pursued her wasn't visible yet. But he knew better than to doubt a dying woman's warning. He shut and barred the door, then carried her to the deerskin pallet near the hearth. The fire's warmth seemed to ease her shivering. Working. Quickly Tahu gathered what he needed: clean cloths, his wife's medicine bag, water from the kettle he'd kept warm for tea, as he cut away the blood-stained fabric around her wound. Memories of his wife, Morning Flower, flooded back. She had been a healer, respected by both their people and the settlers brave enough to seek her help. Before the fever took her and their unborn child, she had taught him much about the healing ways. "Forgive me," he murmured in Apache cleaning the wound as gently as he could. The woman moaned but didn't wake. The bullet had gone clean through, which was a mercy. Still, she'd lost much blood. From Morning Flower's medicine bag, he took dried yarrow to stop the bleeding and echinacea to ward off fever. His hands remembered the motions as he prepared the poultice, crushing the herbs and mixing them with warm water. The familiar scents filled the cabin, bringing with them an ache of loss and memory as he worked. The woman drifted in and out of consciousness. Her words came in broken whispers. "Dressed like Apache, ... Not real, ... My father's men, ... The railroad, ... Tahu's hands stilled for a moment. He'd heard rumors of trouble brewing between the railroad men and the local tribes. If what she said was true, someone was trying to spark a war by blaming his people for attacks they hadn't committed. He threaded a bone needle with sinew and began to stitch the wound closed. Each careful stitch, a prayer for healing. The woman, Clara, she'd mumbled her name once, bore the pain with only soft whimpers. Her strength surprised him. Through the long night, Tahu kept vigil. He spooned water and herb tea between her lips when she could take it, changed the poultice when needed, and watched for signs of fever. Outside, the wind gradually died down, and the night grew quiet except for the pop and crackle of the fire. As the first gray light of dawn crept through the cabin's single window, Clara's breathing finally eased into a steady rhythm. The worst had passed. Tahu sat back in his chair, bone-weary but unable to rest. He studied her face, peaceful now in sleep, and felt the weight of his decision settle over him. By helping her, he had chosen a side in whatever conflict was coming. The safe path would have been to turn her away, to keep to his solitary life. In these mountains, but Morning Flower's voice seemed to whisper in his heart, reminding him that healing was a sacred trust, given not just to some, but to all who needed it. Clara stirred slightly, her face turning toward the warmth of the fire. A strand of hair had fallen across her cheek, and without thinking, Tahu reached out to brush it away. His hand stopped mid-motion, surprised by the gesture. It had been so long since he'd shown tenderness to another human being. The morning light grew stronger, painting the cabin walls with pale gold. Tahu added wood to the fire and began preparing fresh herbs for the day ahead. His decision was made, for better or worse. The woman would live, and with her, the truth of whatever plot had brought her bleeding to his door. He felt both a burden and the blessing of this choice. Like the first spring rain after a long drought, helping her had awakened something in him he'd thought long dead. Whether it was hope or folly, only time would tell. Morning light filtered through the cabin's single window, casting pale shadows across the rough-hewn floor. Clara stirred on the deerskin pallet, her eyelids fluttering open. The pain in her side had dulled to a persistent ache, thanks to the herbs and careful stitching. She found herself staring at unfamiliar log walls, memories of the previous night slowly assembling themselves in her mind. Tahu sat nearby on a wooden stool, grinding herbs with a stone mortar. His movements were precise and careful, each gesture carrying the weight of long practice. When he noticed her watching, he paused in his work. "Thank you," Clara whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "I would have died without your help." He nodded once, acknowledging her gratitude without words. Rising, he poured water from a pottery jar into a tin cup and brought it to her. Clara's hands shook as she took it, but the water was cool and sweet on her parched throat. "The men who attacked us," she began, settling the cup in her lap. They were dressed as Apache warriors, but something wasn't right. Their clothes were too new, their movements too stiff. She closed her eyes, remembering. "We were just a small wagon party heading west. They came out of nowhere at sunset." Tahu's jaw tightened, his dark eyes growing hard. He had heard such stories before, false raids staged to stir up hatred against his people. The railroad men were hungry for land, and fear was their favorite tool. "I ran," Clara continued, her fingers clutching the quilt. "I heard shots behind me. I don't know what happened to the others." Tears welled in her eyes. "I just kept running until I couldn't anymore." Tahu moved to the fireplace, stirring the coals to life. He added small sticks, then larger ones, building the flame with practiced care. The morning air was cool, and his patient needed warmth to heal. "I will get water," he said, picking up 2 wooden buckets. Rest. Outside, the mountain air was crisp and clean. Tahu walked the familiar path to the spring, his moccasins silent on the rocky ground. The sound of running water grew louder as he approached, but another sound made him pause, the distant thunder of hoofbeats. He set down the buckets and stood very still. listening. The sound grew closer, echoing off the valley walls. Then he saw the dust rising above the trees, and his heart grew heavy. Riders were coming, many riders. Taihu grabbed the buckets and hurried back to the cabin. He had barely set them down when the first riders appeared. They came in formation, 50 strong, their horses' hooves drumming against the earth. Lance tips glinted in the morning sun, and rifles rode easy in leather scabbards. These were warriors of his people, led by men he knew. They circled the cabin with practiced precision, their horses wheeling and stopping at signals he remembered well. Clara struggled to sit up on her pallet, her face pale with fear. Taihu touched her shoulder gently, urging her to stay still. "Wait here," he said quietly, then stepped outside to face the warriors. Running Fox, a respected war chief, dismounted. First, others followed, forming a half-circle around the cabin's entrance. Their faces were stern, their postures rigid with purpose. "Brother," Running Fox said in Apache, his voice carrying across the yard, "why does a white woman lie within your walls?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Other warriors muttered among themselves, their eyes hard with suspicion. Taihu stood straight, his hands open at his sides in a gesture of peace. "She came wounded in the night," he answered in their shared tongue. "Men dressed as our people had attacked her wagon party. She would have died without help." Running Fox's expression darkened. "These are dangerous times, brother. The railroad men push further into our lands each day. They do not need more excuses to blame us for violence." "I could not turn her away," Taihu said simply. "My wife's medicine was given to heal all who need it." The mention of Morning Flower brought a moment of silence. Many there had known her, had been healed by her skills. But the respect for her memory warred with present fears. "The white men's law-keepers will come looking," another warrior called out. "They will say, 'We harbor criminals.' They will use this against us." Inside the cabin, Clara listened to the strange words, clutching the quilt tighter around her shoulders. She couldn't understand what was being said, but the tension in the air needed no translation. Her presence here threatened everything this man had built. Yet he had saved her without hesitation. Running Fox stepped closer to Taihu, lowering his voice. "You live apart from us, brother, but you are still of our people. We cannot let your kindness bring war to our children." Taihu met his gaze steadily. "What would you have me do?" The war chief looked at the sun, now climbing higher in the morning. "Sky, you have until sundown to justify this risk you have taken. The council will decide her fate then." He switched to English, raising his voice so Clara could hear. "Until then, neither of you may leave this place." Warriors took up positions around the cabin, some dismounting to rest their horses, others riding out to watch the trails. The morning that had started with such promise now hung heavy with uncertainty. You returned inside, finding Clara struggling to stand. "Please," he said, gently pressing her back onto the pallet. "You must rest to heal. They're going to kill me, aren't they?" she whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. "No," Taihu said firmly, though his heart was troubled. "There is time yet, and truth has power, even in dark times." He moved to the fireplace and began preparing more medicine, his movements deliberate and calm despite the warriors watching through the windows. The sun climbed higher, marking the beginning of what would be the longest day either of them had ever known. The warriors gradually withdrew, their horses' hooves crunching against mountain gravel as they moved to establish camp in a sheltered meadow nearby. Only 2 young braves remained, positioning themselves beneath a gnarled pine tree, where they could watch both the cabin's door and the winding trail that led down to the valley. Inside the cabin, Clara's face was drawn with pain and worry. "Taihu, worked silently at the hearth, stirring a pot of rabbit broth that filled the small space with its rich aroma. The herbs he'd added would help fight fever and give her strength for whatever lay ahead. "You must eat," he said, bringing her a tin cup of the steaming liquid. "Medicine works better when the body has strength." Clara's hands trembled slightly as she took the cup. "Thank you," she whispered. "You've shown such kindness, yet I've brought nothing but trouble to your door." Tahu settled onto his wooden stool, studying the fire's dance across the logs. "Those men outside, many are kin to my late wife, Morning Flower. She was a healer among our people." His voice softened at the memory. "They are good men, loyal to their chief, but these are hard times. Trust comes difficult when so many use deception." "Like those raiders," Clara said, sipping carefully at the broth. "They wanted everyone to believe they were Apache." She hesitated, then set the cup down in her lap. "I need to tell you something that may help explain why they attacked us, or may make you regret saving my life." Tohu turned to face her, his expression watchful but not unkind. "My father's railroad commissioner, Horace Winslow," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "He sent me west to survey water routes for the new rail lines. But some things I've seen, documents I've found. ... She twisted the cup in her hands. "I fear he may be involved with these false raids somehow, using them to drive people away from land the railroad wants." The revelation hung heavy in the air between them. Tahu's face remained carefully neutral, but his mind raced with the implications. This knowledge could either condemn her as an enemy or prove valuable in exposing the truth behind the attacks. "The men outside," he said slowly, "they will want to know this. I know." Clara's voice strengthened with resolve. "And I'll tell them everything, even if it means testifying against my own father. These raids have to stop." The afternoon light began to soften, shadows lengthening across the cabin floor. Tahu shared more about his people as Clara finished the broth, tales of their traditions, their deep connection to the land, their struggles to maintain their way of life as more settlers pushed west. She listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that showed genuine desire to understand. As the sun dipped toward the western peaks, Tahu rose and went to the door. The two young guards straightened as he stepped outside, their hands never far from their weapons. "Brothers," he addressed them in Apache, "I must speak with you." The older of the two, Swift Deer, moved closer while his companion maintained watch. "What words can change what our eyes see?" he asked. "You shelter one whose people take our land." "Under my own roof," Tahu replied firmly, "I have the right to show mercy. It was our way before the white man came. It remains our way." "The old ways change," the younger guard called out. "They must, or we die. Change, yes, but lose our honor? Never." Tahu gestured toward the cabin. "This woman may hold truth that could help our people, but she needs time to heal, to trust." Swift Deer's face remains stern. "At dawn, the council will gather. They will demand too. Know everything: who she is, why she was here, what she knows of these false raiders. Be ready with answers, brother, or her fate will be sealed by silence." Tahu nodded once, then returned inside. The fire had burned low, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Clara had dozed off, her breathing steady but shallow. He added another log to the flames, then sank down beside the hearth. His mind wandered to Morning Flower, remembering how she would often sit in this very spot, grinding her medicines and singing softly. She had taught him that healing meant more than just mending. Wounds had meant restoring balance, making whole what was broken. Now he sat guard over another wounded soul, torn between his duty to his people and the silent vow he'd made when he first pulled Clara from death's door. The fire crackled softly as darkness gathered outside. Through the window, he could see the guards' silhouettes against the deepening purple sky, steadfast in their watch. Tomorrow would bring judgment, but tonight required vigilance. Tahu settled in for the long hours ahead, knowing that dawn would demand choices that would test both his loyalty and his conscience. Night settled heavy over the mountain cabin. The cold crept in through the log walls despite the hearth's steady warmth. Tahu dozed in his chair, his head nodding forward only to snap back up at every sound, the crack of branches in the winter wind, the soft calls of night birds, the occasional murmur from Clara's feverish sleep. Water roots must warn them. ... Clara's whispers drifted through the darkness. Father, how could you? ... Tahu pressed a cool cloth to her forehead, noting how the fever still burned beneath her skin. The wound itself looked clean, no angry red lines spreading outward, but the shock and blood loss had taken their toll. Through the window, he could see the guards' fire flickering, casting long shadows against the trees. Beyond that, more fires dotted the meadow where the larger band of warriors kept their vigil. The hours crept by like molasses, as false dawn began to paint the eastern sky in pale grays. Movement stirred in the warrior camp. Tahu watched through the window as they began forming a wide circle, placing blankets on the frost-covered ground. His heart tightened. The council was gathering. Swift Deer appeared at the cabin door. "It is time," he said simply. Tahu nodded, then turned to Clara. "Can you stand?" She tried to push herself up, but her arms trembled with the effort. I'm not sure. Then I will carry you." The council waits. Clara's eyes widened with fear, but she squared her shoulders. "I'm ready." Tahu wrapped her in his warmest blanket before lifting her carefully. She was light in his arms, too light, like a bird with hollow bones. The morning air bit sharp as he carried her outside, supporting most of her weight as she struggled to get her feet beneath her. 50 pairs of eyes watched their approach. The warriors sat in a perfect circle, their faces impassive. At the head of the circle sat Chief Nantan, his silver hair catching the dawn light. His deep-set eyes missed nothing as Tahu helped Clara settle onto a blanket before the council. "Shelter an enemy under your roof," Chief Nantan began, his voice carrying across the hushed gathering. "Explain." Before Tahu could speak, Clara straightened despite her weakness. "Please," she said, her voice clear though quiet. "Let me tell you myself why I came." A murmur rippled through the warriors. Chief Nantan studied her for a long moment, then inclined his head. "Speak then, woman. But know that lies will bring swift justice." "I was traveling with a small wagon party," Clara began. "We were surveying water sources when raiders attacked us. They wore Apache dress, but they were white men in disguise," her hands twisted in the blanket. "I saw their faces clearly. When one lost his mask. When I fled, they shot me, but I managed to tear this from one man's coat as I escaped." From within her dress pocket, she withdrew a small scrap of fabric, an insignia. Torn and muddy, but still recognizable as belonging to a private security company known to work for the railroad. The warriors leaned forward, passing the fabric. Peace from hand to hand. Conversations broke out in rapid Apache. Tahu listened carefully, noting how the opinions divided. Some dismissed her story outright, calling it a trick. Others spoke of similar raids they'd witnessed, where the attackers moved without Apache wisdom, leaving strange tracks and using wrong weapons. These raids, one elder warrior called out, they always happen near water sources the railroad wants. This is no coincidence. Or it is a clever lie, another countered. Why should we trust the daughter of those who steal our land? Alas. Head snapped up. You know who I am? We have scouts everywhere, Chief Nantan said. We know you are Commissioner Winslow's daughter. This makes your words even more suspect, or more valuable, Tahu spoke for the first time. All eyes turned to him. I have watched her these 2 days. She speaks truth about the raiders, her wound, her fear. These were real. And she carries guilt about her father's actions. This weighs on her spirit. He stepped forward, addressing the whole circle. Our people have always known that mercy does not weaken us, it strengthens our spirit. My wife taught me this. When I found this woman bleeding at my door, I remembered her wisdom. If we turn away from mercy, we become what our enemies claim we are. The council fell silent, considering his words. Clara swayed slightly, her face pale with exhaustion. Chief Nantan raised his hand, commanding attention. We will deliberate on what we have heard, he announced. But know this, if investigation proves you have lied, if this is some trick to help the railroad steal more of our water rights, your blood will stain not only the ground, but also Tahu's honor. Do you understand? Clara nodded solemnly. I understand. I swear by all I hold sacred, I tell you the truth. As if the effort of speaking had drained her last reserves, she suddenly slumped forward. Tahu caught her before she could fall, gathering her once again in his arms. Her skin burned with renewed fever. Take her inside, Chief Nantan ordered. We will send word when we have decided. Tahu carried Clara back to the cabin, her head lolling against his shoulder. The morning sun now stretched across the valley, painting the frost in brilliant diamonds, but its beauty brought him no comfort. He had done what he could to defend her, to defend his choice to help her. Now all they could do was wait, and pray that the council would choose wisdom over suspicion. The council's deliberations stretched through the morning and into afternoon. Inside the cabin, Clara stirred from her pallet, her face drawn with pain. But determined. Please, she said, watching Tahu prepare cornmeal for their meal. Let me help. I can't bear lying here useless. Tahu hesitated, studying her pale face. You need rest to heal. What I need is to feel useful. Clara pushed herself up slowly, steadying herself against the wall. My mother always said, idle hands make a heavy heart. Something in her words echoed his wife's wisdom. With a slight nod, he helped her to the wooden stool by the grinding stone. Small movements only, he cautioned, positioning the stone before her. Clara worked the grinding stone with careful precision, her movements growing smoother as she found her rhythm. Soon, a soft humming accompanied her work, gentle hymns that filled the cabin with unexpected warmth. The melody stirred something in Tahu's chest, memories of his wife singing while she worked, her voice carrying across their small homestead. My mother taught me these songs, Clara said quietly, noting his expression. She found comfort in them, even when father's railroad business kept him away for months. Her hand stilled on the stone. She never trusted his methods, though she never said it outright. Now I understand why. Toe added kindling to the fire, letting her words settle in the air between them. You suspect your father's involvement with the raiders? Clara's shoulders tensed. More than suspect. I've seen his men, the ones he hires for security. They're cruel men led by a captain named Briggs. Her voice caught. I overheard them once, planning something about water rights, but father caught me listening. He sent me out here to survey routes, said it would help me understand progress. She laughed bitterly. I think he wanted me far from those meetings. The afternoon light slanted through the cabin's single window as Clara finished grinding the cornmeal. Despite her weakness, she insisted on helping prepare their simple supper. As she moved about the cabin, she absently fingered a tear in her dress. I should mend this while there's still light, she murmured, retrieving Tahu's sewing kit with trembling hands. As she turned the dress inside out, her fingers found an oddity in the lining, a hidden pocket carefully stitched into the seam. What's this? Clara's brow furrowed as she worked something free from the concealed pocket. A folded paper emerged. Worn at the creases, As she opened it, her face drained of color. "Tahu," she whispered, "look at this." He crossed to her side, studying the document she held. It was a detailed map, marked with proposed railroad routes in red ink. But it was the blue lines that drew his eye, carefully plotted water diversions that would drain the Apache lands and nearby settler farms, all redirected to railroad-controlled reservoirs. Neat notations lined the margins. Dam construction. Site A native resistance expected. Armed response authorized. Site B settler removal required. Minimal compensation. Water rights secured through force if necessary. See Briggs for details. Clara's hands shook as she traced the lines. This must have been slipped into my dress while I was unconscious. In the wagon, someone wanted me to carry this without knowing. Her voice broke. My father. He's not just allowing the raids, he's ordering them. Tahu studied the map intently, memorizing every detail. Here was proof of what his people had suspected, a deliberate campaign to steal their water, their lifeblood. The map showed everything. Planned raids, false flag attacks, strategic water diversions that would force both Apache and settlers from their lands. The council must see this, he said quietly. Clara clutched the map, her knuckles white. They'll never believe it came from me willingly. They'll think it's a trap. Perhaps. Tahu touched the paper gently. But this is truth. Truth has its own power. As darkness gathered outside, the weight of their discovery settled heavy in the cabin. Clara stared into the fire, tears sliding down her cheeks. My father will never forgive me for exposing this. Even if the council believes me, I'll be marked as a traitor to my own family. You choose a harder path, Tahu acknowledged. The path of truth often leads through shadow before reaching light. He added wood to the fire, watching the flames leap higher. When my wife died, I thought grief would swallow me whole. But she taught me that even the darkest night holds stars to guide us. Clara wiped her eyes, squaring her shoulders despite her fear. When will you show the council? At first light. Tahu carefully folded the map, tucking it into his shirt. Rest now. Tomorrow will bring its own battles. In the deepening night, coyotes called from the distant ridges. Clara eventually drifted into uneasy sleep, but Tahu kept vigil, watching the council fires burn low across the valley. The map pressed against his chest like a burning coal. By sunrise, he would have to convince 50 warriors to trust the word of a white woman, the daughter of their enemy. And if they did believe, blood would surely flow, though whose blood remained to be seen. Dawn painted the mountains in shades of amber as Tahu and Clara made their way to the council circle. The morning air bit cold and sharp, making Clara pull her borrowed blanket tighter around her shoulders. 50 pairs of eyes tracked their approach, some curious, others hard with suspicion. Chief Nantan sat cross-legged at the head of the circle, his face weathered like the surrounding cliffs. He motioned for them to sit, and silence fell over the gathering. Tahu drew the map from his shirt, handling it with the gravity of sacred things. My brothers, he began in Apache, then switched to English so Clara could understand what I hold. Shows why raiders attack our lands disguised as Apache warriors. He spread the map on a flat stone in the circle's center. Morning light caught the red and blue lines that spelled destruction for their people. Tahu's finger traced familiar waterways, naming each one in both Apache and English. Here flows Bear Creek, where our children learn to fish. Here runs Eagle Canyon Stream, where our horses drink. His hand moved to other markings. These blue lines show where they plan to steal our water, to force us from our lands. Murmurs rippled through the circle. Clara leaned forward, her voice steady despite her weakness. My father's railroad company drew these plans. The raiders who attacked me were his men, trying to blame the Apache for their own crimes. A warrior named Standing Horse spoke sharply. Why would a white daughter turn against her father? This could be a trick to gain our trust. I turn against lies, not my father, Clara answered, meeting his gaze. The truth on this map is written in his own hand. I know his writing as I know my own name. More voices rose, some arguing for belief, others for caution. Chief Nantan raised his hand for silence. He studied the map intently, his eyes following the marked routes. Finally, he looked up. "Words are wind," he said. "But water speaks true. I will take riders to check these marks near Thunder River. If we find what the map shows, we will know its truth." He selected 10 warriors, including Standing Horse. As they mounted their horses, Chief Nantan fixed Tahu with a stern look. "Watch her well. If this is deception, 2 lives will answer for it." The scouting party rode out, their horses' hooves drumming against the earth. 2 guards remained to watch the cabin, while the rest of the council dispersed to wait. Inside, Clara sank onto her pallet, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "Will they find the survey markers?" she asked. Tahu added wood to the morning fire. "If they are there, our people will find them. We read the land as others read books." As the sun climbed higher, Tahu explained to Clara how his people lived. By water's rhythm, spoke of springs that appeared in sacred places, of how elders could smell rain 3 days before it fell, of children learning to track deer by following their paths to water. "Water is not just drink to us," he said, stirring the cooking pot. "It is the blood of our Mother Earth. When streams die, the land dies. When the land dies, we die." Clara listened, tears gathering in her eyes. "I never understood before," she whispered. "Father talks about water rights like moving numbers on paper. But this," she gestured to the distant springs and streams, "this is life itself." The day stretched long with waiting. Tahu taught Clara to grind herbs for medicine, showing her how his wife had once prepared healing poultices. She shared stories of her mother's garden back east, of summer rains that made roses bloom as the sun began its westward slide. Hoofbeats announced the scouting party's return. Tahu and Clara emerged from the cabin to find the council reassembling. Warriors gathering close to hear the news. Chief Nantan's face was grave as he dismounted. "We found the markers," he announced. "Wood stakes with red cloth, just as the map shows. Fresh tracks of white men's boots. Tools left by their surveyors." Standing Horse stepped forward, holding something in his hand. "We found this also." He opened his palm to reveal a brass tag stamped with railroad numbers. The council erupted in discussion. Even the doubters now leaned forward, examining the evidence with new eyes. Chief Nantan raised his hands for attention, about to speak then. A young warrior burst into the circle, pointing westward. "Smoke," he called out. "Smoke on the horizon." All eyes turned to where dark clouds billowed against the evening sky. The council's moment of decision shattered as warriors reached for weapons, knowing that where there was smoke, raiders often followed. Tahu felt Clara's hand grip his arm. Together they watched the smoke rise, a dark promise of violence yet to come. The map's warnings about armed response and force, if necessary, took on sudden, deadly meaning. Chief Nantan barked quick orders, sending scouts to investigate. The council's peaceful deliberation transformed into urgent preparation for whatever approached from the west. Clara's proof had convinced them, but there would be no time for celebration. Dark smoke against the sunset sky promised that their troubles were far from over. The smoke drew closer as riders thundered into the Apache camp. Not warriors this time, but 3 settler families' women, clutching children, men with ash-streaked faces. They stumbled from their horses, eyes wild with terror. "Apaches burned our homes," a woman cried, holding a sobbing child. "They took everything, killed our livestock." Clara stepped forward, steadied by Tahu's arm. These raiders, what did they look like? Did you see their faces? An older man, his beard singed, shook his head. War paint, feathers, spoke Apache words. He spat on the ground. Town folks'll be riding soon. There'll be blood for this. Chief Nantan addressed the settlers in careful English. Not my people. We have been here, in council. Lies, another settler shouted. Who else would it be? Clara's voice cut through the chaos. The same men who shot me. White raiders in disguise, trying to start a war. She turned to the chief. Please, let me show them the map. Let me explain, but suspicion had already taken root. Warriors gathered in clusters, speaking in low voices. Some cast dark looks at Clara, others at the settlers. The fragile trust built over days began to crack like sun-baked earth. Tahu led the settlers to a separate camp area where the Apache women brought them water and blankets. As night fell, tension hung thick as storm clouds over the valley in the darkness. Clara sat wrapped in her blanket near Tahu's cabin door. Her voice rose soft and clear, carrying a hymn across the quiet camp. Amazing grace. How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. ... The melody wove through the night air like silver thread. Tahu stood in his doorway, remembering how his wife had hummed her own people's songs while working. The memory pierced him like a thorn sweet and sharp at once. Heavy footsteps approached. Hastian, a young warrior who had opposed helping Clara from the start, emerged from the shadows. His face was hard as flint. You dishonor your wife's memory, he said to Tahu in Apache. Sheltering this white woman, believing her stories while our enemies burn homes and blame us. Tahu's hands clenched. My wife taught me to heal, not hate. Under my roof, mercy stands guard. Mercy. Hastian stepped closer. Or weakness. You let this woman turn your head with songs and soft words. Meanwhile, her people plot our destruction. Tahu felt rage rise like a dust storm in his chest. His muscles coiled, ready to strike. But Clara's hymn still floated on the night air, reminding him of gentler ways. My wife would say strength shows itself in protection, not violence. Tahu said quietly, I made a choice to save a life. I stand by it. Your choice may doom us all, Hastian spat, but turned away into the darkness. Clara's song faded to silence. I heard angry words, she said. Was it about me? About choices? Tahu answered, settling beside her. About trust and honor. They sat in silence as the fire burned low. Around midnight, scouts slipped into camp like shadows. They gathered the council with urgent news. The disguised raiders had been spotted. Camped along Thunder River. 20 men, heavily armed, still wearing pieces of their Apache costumes. Chief Nantan called the warriors together. We will confront them at noon tomorrow, he announced. Show them we know their lies. Tahu stepped forward. Clara must come with us. Murmurs of protest rose, but he continued. She must face these men. Show everyone they are her father's raiders. Only then will both sides see the truth. The chief considered, then nodded slowly. The white woman will come. Her words must prove true, or both your lives are forfeit. Clara stood straighter despite her wound. I'm ready, she said. I'll face them all. As the council dispersed, Tahu watched dawn's first light touch the mountains. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, truth, and perhaps blood. But for now, in the quiet morning air, he felt strangely at peace with his choices. The settlers slept uneasily in their borrowed blankets. Warriors prepared weapons and horses for the coming day. And in Tahu's cabin, Clara dozed fitfully. Her hymn still echoing in the corners of his mind, The noonday sun blazed overhead as Tahu led his horse along the winding path to Thunder River. Clara rode behind him, her hands gripping the saddle horn, her wounded side still tender. 50 Apache warriors followed in formation, their horses' hooves raising dust clouds that drifted across the sage-dotted valley. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. Each step brought her closer to facing the men who had shot her, who had terrorized innocent people while wearing stolen Apache dress. She drew strength from Tahu's steady presence ahead of her, from the quiet dignity with which he carried himself even now. There, one of the scouts whispered in Apache, pointing toward a bend in the river. Through the cottonwoods, they could see the raiders' camp. Stolen cattle milled in a makeshift pen, their brands still visible. 20 men lounged around several campfires, their true nature revealed in the strange mix of cavalry uniforms and badly copied Apache clothing. Feathers stuck haphazardly in cavalry hats. War paint smeared carelessly across white faces. Captain Briggs stood at the center of the camp, his massive frame unmistakable even at this distance. Clara's wound throbbed at the sight of him. She remembered his cruel laugh as he had fired at her fleeing wagon. Chief Nantan raised his hand, and the Apache warriors fanned out in a wide arc around the camp. The raiders scrambled for their weapons, but found themselves surrounded. "Leave these lands," Chief Nantan commanded in clear English. "Your lies bring shame to both peoples." Briggs threw back his head and laughed. "Lies. We're just giving people what they expect from savages." He reached into a saddlebag and pulled out a piece of burned canvas. "Look here, proof of our latest work. Recognize this girl." Clara's throat tightened. The canvas was from her wagon, scorched and stained. She felt Tahu stiffen beside her. "I recognize you, Captain Briggs," Clara called out, her voice stronger than she felt. "You shot me as I fled. You're no Apacheer, a hired killer in a poor disguise." Murmurs rippled through both groups. Briggs's face darkened with rage. "Here's our proof," he snarled, shaking the canvas. "Sweet little lady running from the fierce Apache raiders. Nobody'll believe different, especially not after we're done with the next homestead. The people will know the truth," Clara insisted. She pointed at a raider with a distinctive scar across his chin. "That man there, he's the one who set fire to our wagon. And you?" She turned to another. "You wore that same cavalry jacket when you shot our horses." The raiders shifted uneasily. Some reached for their guns. "Enough talk," Briggs growled. He drew his pistol with lightning speed, firing into the air. Chaos erupted. The raiders scattered, firing wildly as they retreated toward the hills. Apache warriors returned fire, but held their ground, unwilling to chase the raiders into what might be a trap. Within minutes, the sound of hoofbeats faded into the rocks, leaving only drifting gun smoke and scattered Apache feathers dropped by the fleeing imposters. You quickly checked the warriors. 2 had suffered minor wounds. They were binding them when new hoofbeats thundered from the opposite direction. "Riders coming," a scout called. Many horses. Through the dust came 30 settlers on horseback, rifles raised. Their faces were hard with anger and fear. At their head rode the man with the singed beard from the night before. "There they are," he shouted. "The raiders who burned our homes." "No." Clara urged her horse forward, despite Tahu's warning hand. "These men are innocent. The real raiders just fled into those hills." "More lies," someone shouted. "We saw Apache warriors raid our neighbors." The settlers leveled their rifles. The Apache warriors knocked arrows and raised their own guns. The air crackled with tension. Tahu guided his horse between the two groups. Clara at his side, his voice carried across the space between them, clear and firm. "Look around you," he commanded. See the truth with your own eyes." He pointed to the scattered cavalry buttons, the dropped feathers, the stolen cattle with settler brands. Clara held up the map she had found, explaining its meaning, showing how both Apache and settler lands were marked for theft. "The railroad men hired raiders to dress as Apache," she declared. "They want us to fight each other while they steal our water and land. I should know," her voice caught. "My own father is one of them," a settler woman pushed forward on her horse. "Why should we believe you?" "'Cause I've seen both sides now," Clara answered. "I've seen the raiders attack my wagon and blame the Apache. I've seen real Apache show mercy to a wounded stranger. Which side offers you proof? Which side shows you respect?" The settlers muttered among themselves, looking at the evidence scattered around the raiders' abandoned camp. The man with the singed beard slowly lowered his rifle. "If what you say is true," he said carefully, "then we've all been played for fools, and we've all lost because of it," Tahu added. "Your homes, our peace, all burned by the same hands." The tension began to ease, like a spring storm breaking. But trust, once shattered, could not be mended in a single moment. The settlers kept their distance. The warriors remained alert. Yet something had shifted. Small space for truth had opened between them. Chief Nanten spoke quietly to his warriors in Apache, then addressed the settlers. "We will track these raiders. They must answer for their crimes against both peoples." The bearded settler nodded slowly. "Some of us will ride with you. Too many eyes are better than few." As the two groups began to organize their pursuit, Clara sagged in her saddle, exhausted but relieved. Tahu steadied her with a gentle hand. "You showed great courage," he said softly. "I only spoke the truth," she answered, "though I fear this is far from over." Around them, Apache warriors and settlers began to work out how they would track the raiders together. The sun climbed higher, glinting off the river that had sustained both peoples for generations, the river that some would steal, but that others would fight to share. The air crackled with tension as 30 rifles pointed at 50 bows and guns. The sun beat down mercilessly on both groups, sweat glistening on determined faces. Clara's heart pounded as she watched fingers tighten on triggers. "Wait!" She cried out, her voice cutting through the heavy silence. She pulled the folded map from her dress pocket, holding it high above her head. The paper fluttered in the hot breeze. "This proves everything. Look at the evidence before you spill innocent blood." Most of the settlers kept their weapons trained. On the Apache warriors, their expressions hard with distrust. But movement stirred at the back of their group. An elderly man in a black coat urged his horse forward, his white hair gleaming in the sunlight. "Hold, my friends," he called out, his voice carrying the weight of years in the pulpit. "I know fear grips all our hearts, but let us remember the words of our Lord, and shall know the truth. And the truth shall make you free." "Preacher?" Morrison raised his weathered hands toward both groups. "What harm can come from listening? If the lady speaks false, we lose nothing but time. If she speaks true, we may prevent a grave injustice." The Apache warriors remained still as statues. Arrows knocked but not drawn. Chief Nantan studied the preacher with careful eyes. Clara seized the moment, unfolding the map with trembling fingers. These marks show planned railroad routes cutting through both Apache lands and settler homesteads. "See here?" she pointed. 2 red lines crossing water sources. They mean to divert the rivers, steal the water that sustains us all. The raiders are hired men, paid to drive both peoples away so the land can be seized. A young settler lowered his rifle slightly. "That there's railroad company paper. Sure enough. I recognize the letterhead. Could be stolen." Another growled. "Could be forged." Preacher Morrison moved closer to examine the map. "These are official survey markings. And look here at the commissioner's seal." He turned to the settlers. Brothers and sisters, we must consider that we've been deceived. Slowly, reluctantly, rifles began to lower. The Apache warriors eased their bowstrings, though their eyes remained sharp and watchful. Chief Nantan spoke, his words measured. "We will meet at sunset near the widower's cabin. Bring your wise ones. We will speak of truth and lies." The bearded settler leader nodded stiffly. "Agreed, but any sign of treachery, ... There will be none," Tahu said firmly. "You have my word." The two groups separated like oil and water, each backing away with weapons ready. Soon only dust clouds marked their passing, drifting across the valley like unsettled spirits. On the ride back to the cabin, Clara slumped in her saddle. The adrenaline that had sustained her was fading, leaving behind bone-deep exhaustion and darker fears. Tahu rode beside her, watching her face. "Speak what troubles your heart," he said quietly. Clara's eyes filled with tears. "The commissioner's seal on that map, Pitt's my father's. His signature marks the water routes." Her voice broke. "My own father planned this evil. He sent men to burn homes, to murder innocent people, all for profit and power." They rode in silence for several moments, hooves crunching on dry earth. Finally, Tahu spoke, his words gentle but firm. "The Great Spirit often chooses unlikely hands to reveal hidden wrongs. A daughter's courage may shine light into her father's darkness." Clara wiped her eyes. "How can I face him? How can I stand against my own blood?" "With truth as your shield," Tahu answered. "And with friends at your side." They approached the cabin as the sun began its westward slide. Apache scouts shadowed their movement from the ridgelines, while settler patrols could be glimpsed in the distance. The valley itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for nightfall's reckoning. Inside the cabin, Clara sank to her knees beside the hearth. The fire had burned low, but its warmth still offered comfort. She clasped her hands together, bowing her head. "Dear Lord," she whispered, her voice trembling, "grant me strength for what's to come. Help me stand firm for justice, even against those I love. Protect these people from the greed that would destroy them. And please," she swallowed hard, "please help my father see the truth before it's too late." Across the room, Tahu sat on a wooden stool, the steady scratch of whetstone against steel marking his progress as he sharpened his knife. The familiar motion brought no peace tonight. He knew that words alone might not be enough to bridge the chasm of distrust between his people and the settlers. Blood might yet stain the ground before truth could take root. His gaze fell on Clara's bowed head, her shoulders shaking with silent tears. Despite everything, she had chosen to stand with justice rather than blood ties. Her courage reminded him of his late wife's strength, bringing an ache to his heart that was both sweet and painful. The sun's last rays painted the cabin walls gold, then faded to purple shadow. Soon the council fires would be lit. Soon words would either build bridges or spark flames of war. Tahu tested his knife's edge with his thumb, praying he would not need to use it before the night was done. Outside, coyotes began their evening songs, their voices rising like spirits on the wind. Clara's prayers continued, barely louder than whispers, but carrying the weight of mountains in their words. The valley waited, balanced between peace and violence, while truth gathered its strength for the coming storm. The night air hung heavy, with wood smoke and tension as lanterns cast flickering circles of light across the gathering. 24 settlers faced an equal number of Apache warriors, their shadows dancing against the rocky ground like restless spirits. Between them, Clara stood beside a rough wooden table, her fingers trembling as she smoothed out the creased map. "These red lines," she said, her voice carrying clear in the hushed night, "mark where the railroad plans to build dams." She traced the ink markings. "See how they cut across both Apache hunting grounds and settler homesteads. The water would be diverted here, leaving the valley dry as dust. Preacher Morrison stepped forward, holding his lantern close to illuminate the document. These are official Railroad Commission stamps, friends, no mistake about that. The settlers shifted uneasily, while the Apache warriors watched with stone-faced intensity. Chief Nantan studied the map, his weathered fingers following the stream paths he had known since childhood. The raiders who attacked both our peoples, Clara continued. They were hired to make us fight each other. While we waste strength in hatred, the railroad steals our water and with it, our future. My boy saw them raiders clear as day, a settler woman called out. Had Apache paint on their faces. Paint can be put on, Tahu spoke up from Clara's side, and taken off. Like the lies they wear. Preacher Morrison raised his hands. Consider, friends. We all need water to survive, Apache and settler alike. The good book tells us that God makes the rain fall on the just and unjust. Should we not share his bounty as neighbors? A murmur rippled through both groups. Clara saw doubt beginning to soften hard expressions. Even some of the warriors nodded slightly at the preacher's words. The crackle of the lantern flames seemed to grow louder in the thoughtful silence. Then another sound cut through the night, the sharp crack of a rifle. "Get down!" Two shouted, yanking Clara toward the ground as bullets whined overhead. Chaos erupted in seconds. Horses screamed, people scattered, and lanterns went flying. One smashed against dry brush, flames leaping up hungrily. More shots rang out from the darkness. Clara glimpsed masked riders emerging from the shadows, their horses' hooves thundering against the earth. The gathering dissolved into mayhem as settlers and Apache alike dove for cover. The map, Clara scrambled toward the table, reaching for the precious evidence. Rough hands seized her from behind. She kicked and thrashed as two masked men dragged her backward. "To who?" she screamed. To who, through the spreading flames and gun smoke, she saw him fighting to reach her. But fire blocked his path, and bullets kicked up dust at his feet. The last glimpse she had of him was his anguished face through a wall of flame. The raiders threw her across a saddle. She struggled, but a heavy hand pressed her down as the horse galloped into the darkness. Behind them, she heard shouts of anger and accusation. She led them here. It was a trap. Betrayers. The voices faded as the horse carried her deeper into the night. Tears streaked her face. Not from the smoke, but from the knowledge that the fragile trust she had helped build was now shattered. Back at the attacked gathering, Tahu stood amid the chaos, watching helplessly as Clara vanished into the darkness. The fire had spread, forcing everyone back. Settlers and Apache warriors faced each other with renewed suspicion, weapons half raised. She planned this. Someone shouted, "Brought us together so the raiders could strike." The white woman played us false. A warrior spat. Tahu's voice rose above the accusations. "She is innocent. Those men took her by force." But few seemed to hear him over the crackling flames and their own anger. The gathering broke apart, each group retreating with bitter words and threatening gestures. The preacher tried to call for calm, but his words were lost in the discord. Soon Tahu stood alone in the firelight, his honor questioned by both peoples. The map that might have brought peace lay trampled and burning in the dirt. Above him, stars wheeled indifferently across the vast desert sky. Somewhere in that darkness, Clara was being carried away by the very men she had tried to expose. He had vowed to protect her, had defended her before his own people. Now she was gone, and with her, any hope of peace between settler and Apache. The night wind carried the bitter scent of smoke and failure as Tahu watched the darkness that had swallowed Clara, his heart heavy with the weight of his broken promise. The flames cast his shadow long against the ground, a solitary figure caught between two worlds, trusted by neither. In the distance, coyotes began to howl. their cries mixing with the last echoes of gunfire into a mournful chorus that spoke of loss and betrayal. Tahu stood amid the smoldering ruins of the gathering place, his eyes fixed on the raiders' tracks leading into the darkness. The night wind carried ash and the bitter scent of betrayal. Without hesitation, he mounted his horse and urged it forward. Following the trail while it was still fresh, the moon cast silver light across the rocky terrain. As Tahu tracked the raiders through twisting canyons, his trained eye caught signs others might miss: disturbed gravel, broken twigs, a horse's hoofprint clear in a patch of sand. The raiders were moving fast but careless, confident no one would follow as he rode. Memories of his late wife, Nasha, filled his mind. Her gentle voice seemed to whisper on the wind, reminding him of their last conversation before illness took her. She had made him promise to choose peace over vengeance, to be a bridge between peoples rather than a warrior. The memory brought both comfort and pain. "I choose peace," he whispered to the night, "but I cannot choose to abandon one who needs help." The canyons gave way to wider valleys as false dawn began to pale the eastern sky. Tahu dismounted, leading his horse carefully as he followed the tracks. The raiders' trail led toward a grove of cottonwoods nestled in a sheltered draw. He tied his horse in a hidden hollow and crept forward on foot. Morning light filtered through the cottonwood leaves as Tahu found a vantage point above the raiders' camp. His heart clenched at what he saw. Clara sat bound to a wagon wheel, her dress torn and dirty, but her head held high. 4 armed men lounged around a dying campfire, while 2 more stood guard. Rifles ready. Tahu counted their weapons: 6 rifles, several pistols visible in holsters. Too many for a direct attack. He watched as one guard roughly offered Clara a canteen. She turned her face away, earning a curse from the man. "You'll drink when your father pays," the guard sneered, "assuming he wants you back alive." Clara's voice carried clearly in the morning air. "My father will never pay raiders and thieves, that's so." Another man laughed harshly. "Seeing as how he hired us in the first place, I reckon you don't know your daddy as well as you think." Tahu's fingers tightened on his knife handle as he listened. The raiders continued talking, unaware of his presence above them. "Commissioner Winslow's got big plans for this territory," one said, cleaning his rifle. "Once the Apache and settlers kill each other off, ain't nobody left to stop the railroad taking what it wants. And we get paid well for stirring up trouble," another added with a cruel laugh. "Playing Indians the easiest money I ever made." Tahu felt fury rise in his throat like bitter water. Clara's own father had orchestrated this evil, hiring men to pose as Apache, attacking innocent people, all to steal the water that gave life to the land. He watched Clara's shoulders shake with silent sobs as she absorbed this. Confirmation of her worst fears. The morning wore into afternoon as Tahu observed the camp. The raiders kept to the shade, drinking and playing cards. They were overconfident, but not careless enough for him to attempt a rescue. 6 armed men against one would end only in death as the sun began to sink. Tahu crept closer, using the lengthening shadows for cover. He needed to hear more to understand their plans. 2 raiders spoke in low voices near the edge of camp. "Boss says we move her tomorrow," one said. "Taking her to the railroad camp up north. Gonna keep her quiet until the water rights are secured." "What then?" Then the man spat into the dust. Accidents happen, especially to folks who know too much. Tahu retreated silently into the gathering dusk, his heart heavy with what he had learned. Clara's life hung by a thread, and her own father held the knife. The stars began to appear overhead, bright and cold as destiny. Finding a sheltered spot away from the camp, Tahu knelt in the sand. He closed his eyes, remembering Nasha's teachings about seeking wisdom in stillness. The desert night wrapped around him like a blanket as he whispered a prayer not for vengeance, but for courage to do what must be done. "Creator of all things, He prayed softly in his native tongue, "Guide my hands. Let me bring justice without hatred. Let me save this innocent one without becoming what I fight against." The stars wheeled slowly overhead as Tahu kept his vigil, planning his next move. He could not save Clara alone, but perhaps he did not have to. There were others who needed to know the truth, others who might help if he could reach them in time. Dawn was still hours away as Tahu rose from his prayers. He moved like a shadow back to where he had left his horse, pausing one last time to look toward the raiders' camp where Clara waited, unaware of his presence. He would return, but first, he needed to gather allies. The truth he had discovered was too important to risk failing. "Hold on," he whispered into the night. "I will come back for you." With that promise carried on the wind, Tahu mounted his horse and rode into the darkness, his path clear before him. The stars continued their eternal dance overhead, watching silently as justice and mercy moved in their own slow circles below. Dawn painted the eastern sky in soft rose and gold as Tahu rode hard into the Apache camp. Warriors gripped their weapons. At his approach, still tense from recent events, the chief stood waiting, his weathered face revealing nothing as Tahu dismounted. "I found them," Tahu said, his voice carrying across the quiet camp. The raiders holed Clara in a cottonwood grove near Snake Canyon. Chief Nantan gestured for Tahu to follow him to the council circle. Other warriors gathered, their faces stern. With suspicion, Stu described what he had witnessed Clara bound to the wagon wheel, the raiders' boasts about her father's involvement, their plans to silence her. "These are just words," one warrior called out. "Why should we believe the white woman did not plan this herself?" Tahu met the warrior's challenge steadily. "I heard them speak of killing her once they have what they want. No one sacrifices their own child for such a scheme." "Unless it is all deception," another argued. "A trick to draw us into open war." The chief raised his hand for silence. He studied Tahu's face for a long moment, reading the truth in his eyes. "You wish to rescue her?" "I must," Tahu replied. "What I heard confirms everything she told us. Her father hired these men to drive both Apache and settlers from the water. If she dies, the truth dies with her." Murmurs of disagreement rippled. Through the circle, the chief held up his hand again. "The council cannot risk war over one white woman. If you choose this path, you walk it alone." Tahu nodded, accepting the terms. "I ask only for your blessing to try." The chief's stern expression softened slightly. "You have it. Your wife's spirit speaks through your actions. Mercy need not make us weak." Without waiting for further discussion, Tahu returned to his cabin. He checked his rifle carefully, counting each bullet. His knife he sharpened to a razor's edge. As he prepared his horse, a voice called out behind him. "Wait, friend." The preacher from town approached, his own horse saddled behind him. "Coming with you." Tahu paused in his work. "This is not your fight. The Lord's fight is my fight," the preacher replied. His weathered face showed determination beneath his gray beard. "And I've stayed silent too many times when I should have spoken for justice." Tahu studied the older man. "It will be dangerous." "So was Daniel's den of lions," the preacher said with a slight smile. "But God's mercy saw him through." Something in the preacher's quiet courage reminded Tahu of his wife's wisdom. He nodded. "Then we ride together." They set out as the morning sun climbed higher, following Tahu's trail back through the canyons. The preacher rode steadily beside him, occasionally humming hymns under his breath. As they stopped to rest the horses at midday, the older man spoke of his past. 20 years ago, I watched settlers drive a peaceful tribe from their hunting grounds," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I said nothing, did nothing, told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. He looked at Tahu. That silence haunts me still. Why speak now? Tahu asked. 'Cause God's mercy is greater than any man's strength, the preacher replied. He offers chances to make right what once went wrong. I aim to take this one. They rode on through the afternoon heat, the preacher's words settling into Tahu's thoughts. His own strength had always been enough before in breaking horses, in surviving alone, in protecting what was his. But this task felt different. Perhaps, like the preacher said, it would take something greater than strength. The sun was setting when they reached the ridge above the raiders' camp. Tahu and the preacher left their horses hidden and crept forward to observe. Clara remained tied too. The wagon wheel, her head bowed but her back straight. 6 raiders lounged around their fire. Passing a bottle between them, Tahu gripped his rifle, checking once more that it was loaded. His pulse remained steady as he studied the camp's layout, marking each raider's position. Everything he had lived, through his wife's death, his years alone. Meeting Clara had led to this moment of choice. The preacher touched his arm. I'll pray while you do what must be done, he whispered. The Lord's mercy goes with you. Tahu nodded, feeling the weight of all that hung in the balance. In the dying light, he could see Clara lift her head, as if sensing hope approaching in the gathering darkness. He took a deep breath, ready to risk everything to save her. Moonlight silvered the ridge as Tahu and the preacher made their way down toward the raiders' camp. The fire had burned low, casting dancing shadows across the sleeping forms. 2 guards sat near Clara, passing a bottle between them, their rifles propped carelessly against a log. Tahu moved like a shadow, each step placed with the care of a lifetime spent tracking. The preacher followed, his older frame moving with surprising stealth. They paused behind a fallen cottonwood, and Tahu gestured to the lantern hanging from the nearest wagon. When I signal, he whispered, throw it into their powder stores. The preacher nodded, pulling out his flint. The Lord works in mysterious ways, he murmured, sometimes through fire itself. Tahu crept closer, keeping to the deeper shadows. Clara's head lifted slightly. She had spotted him. Her fingers twitched against her bonds, but she kept still, understanding the need for silence. 20 feet away, one guard dozed while the other stared into the dying fire. Tahu raised his hand, giving the signal. The preacher struck his flint, and the lantern blazed to life. In one smooth motion, he hurled it toward the raiders' wagon. Glass shattered, oil sprayed, and flames roared up into the night sky. The guards leaped to their feet, shouting in alarm. Tahu burst from cover, knife flashing. 2 quick slashes freed Clara's hands while chaos erupted around them. The preacher's voice boomed out from different positions, making it seem as if multiple attackers surrounded the camp. The Lord's judgment comes, he called, his voice echoing. Off canyon walls, surrender and be spared. Raiders scrambled for weapons, firing wildly into the darkness. Tahu pulled Clara behind a wagon wheel as bullets splintered wood nearby. She clung to him, her whole body trembling. Thank you, she whispered through quiet sobs. I knew you'd come. Save your thanks, Tahu replied, checking around the wagons. Edge were not clear yet. More shots rang out, but the raiders' confusion worked against them. The preacher's voice, combined with multiple echoes, convinced them they faced an entire war party. Several men mounted up and fled, their horses' hooves thundering into the night. Captain Briggs emerged from his tent, pistol raised. Hold your ground, you cowards, he shouted. His eyes fell on Clara and Tahu. A cruel smile twisted his face. Your own father signed your death warrant, girl, he sneered. Paid good money to silence his troublesome daughter. What kind of man does that, I wonder? Clara stiffened beside Tahu, but her voice stayed steady. "A man who'll face justice for his crimes." Briggs laughed and leveled his pistol. Tahu moved faster. His knife struck Briggs' wrist, sending the weapon spinning away. In 2 steps, Tahu closed the distance and drove his fist into the raider's jaw. Briggs sprawled in the dirt. "Kill me then, Apache." Briggs spat blood. "Prove what a savage you are." Tahu stood over him, knife raised. Clara's hand touched his arm gently. "Let him face the law," she said softly. "Death's too easy for what he's done." Tahu nodded, then struck Briggs with his knife's pommel, leaving him unconscious but alive. The preacher emerged from the shadows, leading their horses. "Time to ride," he said, urgently. "The others will return with reinforcements." They mounted. Quickly, Clara sharing Tahu's horse. Behind them, hoofbeats announced the remaining raiders giving chase. They rode hard through the night, the moon lighting their way through narrow canyons. Clara held tight to Tahu's waist as they galloped, her faith in him never wavering. Dawn's first light painted the eastern sky when they heard riders approaching from ahead. Tahu reached for his rifle, but then relaxed as he recognized the lead. Rider Chief Nantan himself, with 20 warriors behind him. The chief reined in beside them. "We could not let you face this alone," he said to Tahu. "Your courage shamed our caution." More hoofbeats approached from behind the pursuing raiders galloping around the canyon's bend. They pulled up short at the sight of so many warriors. Morning light revealed their false Apache disguises, poorly painted faces, and stolen decorations. From the other direction came the sound of more riders. A group of settlers appeared, led by the town sheriff. They had followed the sound of gunfire, arriving just in time to witness the raiders' exposure. "Dear God," the sheriff breathed, seeing the fake war paint and stolen items. So it was all a lie. The raiders tried to flee, but found themselves surrounded. Warriors efficiently stripped away their disguises, revealing the true faces beneath. Several settlers recognized them as drifters who had passed through town days before. Claiming to be survivors of Apache attacks, Clara's voice rang out clear in the morning air. "These men were hired by the railroad dand my father to drive. Both settlers and Apache from the water rights." She held up the map they had discovered. "This proves their plan. They wanted you to blame each other while they stole what belonged to all." The sheriff examined the map, his face darkening with anger. "We've been played for fools," he said. He turned to Chief Nantan. "We owe you an apology, Chief, and our thanks for helping expose this truth." The chief inclined his head. "Perhaps. Now we can speak of sharing the water, rather than fighting over it." The raiders were bound and loaded into a wagon for transport to the territorial prison. Captain Briggs, still unconscious, would face a judge's justice rather than a quick death. As the sun rose fully over the canyon walls, settlers and Apache alike gathered to hear Clara's full testimony. Tahu stood slightly apart, watching her strength as she spoke truth to both peoples. The preacher joined him, his weathered face peaceful. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," the older man said quietly. "Sometimes it takes a wound to heal a deeper division." Tahu nodded, understanding now that his choice to help Clara that first night had led to something far greater than one act of mercy. As if sensing his thoughts, Clara glanced his way and smiled. Her eyes full of gratitude and something more, a promise of hope yet to come. Morning sunlight spilled across the valley as settlers and Apache gathered near the town church. The preacher stood on the steps, his Bible open in weathered hands. Tahu and Clara sat together on a nearby bench, their shoulders barely touching. The railway commissioner's private car had arrived an hour earlier, bringing Clara's father to witness what he called this unfortunate situation. Commissioner Williams stood apart from the crowd, his fancy Eastern suit collecting dust. His eyes kept darting between his daughter and the assembled faces, searching for sympathy but finding none. The preacher's voice carried across the gathered people. "We stand here today because truth has prevailed over deception. The Lord commands us to bear witness, and so we shall." He gestured to the pile of false Apache garments and the marked maps laid out before him. These items tell the story of greed and betrayal, but also of courage and redemption. Clara rose slowly, her hand brushing Tahu's shoulder for strength. She walked to face her father, tears gleaming in her eyes, but her voice steady. "Father," she said, loud enough for all to hear, "tell them the truth. Tell them who ordered the raids, who paid Captain Briggs to terrorize innocent people." Commissioner Williams tugged at his collar. "Now, Clara, you're confused. These savages clearly know more lies." Clara's voice cracked with emotion. "I have your letters to Captain Briggs. I know you ordered him to kill me when I discovered the truth." Gasps rose from the crowd. The commissioner's face turned ashen. Chief Nantan stepped forward, his stern gaze fixed on Williams. "Your own daughter," the chief said quietly. "You would spill her blood for water rights?" Williams slumped, the weight of his schemes finally breaking him. "The railroad needed this route," he whispered. "The water, the land, it would have made us rich." When Clara threatened to expose everything, he covered his face with shaking hands. "Oh, God, forgive me." "God may forgive," Clara said, tears flowing freely now. "But I banish you from my life, just as these good people must banish you from their lands." The chief nodded solemnly. "We will not take your life, though our laws would permit it. Instead, you will leave these territories and never return. This is mercy you did not show others." The sheriff stepped forward. "The territorial governor will hear of this. Your railway career is finished, Williams." Settlers began to approach the Apache leaders led by the preacher. They spoke of water rights, of sharing the streams and rivers that gave life to the valley. Under the morning sun, hands were clasped, and promises made to honor the land's bounty together. Clara stood alone, watching her father being led away to the railway car. Tohu moved quietly to her side, his presence steady and warm. "Your mother would be proud," he said softly. "You chose truth over blood." They walked together back to Tahu's cabin as afternoon shadows lengthened across the valley. The small home that had once echoed with his solitude now rang with new life. Clara lit the lamp while Tahu built up the fire, their movements already falling into comfortable rhythm. In the lamplight, Tahu knelt by his bedroll. For the first time since his wife's death, he prayed aloud, his voice gentle in the quiet room. "Great Spirit, Father God, I thank you for your mercy, for the memory of my wife, who taught me to heal instead of harm, for this woman you brought to my door, whose courage lights the darkness. Let your peace fill this valley as dawn fills the sky." Clara's hand found his as he prayed, their fingers intertwining. Outside, the first light of dawn painted the mountains gold, touching cloud and canyon with promise. The small cabin glowed with warmth, no longer a shelter for grief, but a sanctuary of hope reborn. Thank you for watching. If this one reached you, consider subscribing. I'll be back tomorrow with more meaning, more humanity.